And that's night one done. I don't really know how to talk about how to go for an intro for this. So instead, let's talk about this little thing. So the show finally starts. We have a big moment where Vince comes out with all the roster members out on the stage. He welcomes the fans back. Back after WrestleMania, we have the America the Beautiful whole song, and immediately as we're about to start the show, we're informed that because of the weather, we are gonna have to delay the show. In fact, a whole half hour went by. We had to wait a full half hour before the show actually started. We had a lot of backstage promos for matches that were both happening and not happening that night. Until we finally got to start the show. And we started, unfortunately, as I had heard, with the WWE Championship match. Drew McIntyre versus Bobby Lashley. Now, the reason I say unfortunate is because, as I mentioned in my prediction video, I generally don't like world titles opening the show. Because to me, the opening match of a show is supposed to kickstart the show and get us excited for what's to come later. A world title gets a little bit lesser for me if that's worth. To me, a work rate match, like for example Seth Rollins versus Cesaro, or a lesser title match could open the show, like the tag team title match. But whatever, it is what it is. Bobby Lashley versus Drew opened the show. They started with a lot of chain wrestling as we began the match. Then we transitioned into a little bit more power wrestling. Drew hit several belly-to-belly suplexes. At one point, he hit 3 Future Shock DDTs in a row. Well, but that wasn't enough to put Bobby down. Bobby hit several. What was it called? One-armed spinebusters. That wasn't enough to put down Drew. At one point, I think Bobby went for a move, but Drew's transitioned into a Kimura lock. But Bobby made it to the ropes. There were several attempts at the Hurt Lock from Bobby Lashley, but ultimately it didn't work out. Drew at one point went for the Claymore, but Bobby Lashley rolled out of the ring. Then Bobby was able to hit a massive Glasgow kick. He was set up for the Claymore, but then I think MVP did something on the outside, just for a second, and then Bobby was able to get out of the Hurt, to avoid the Claymore. He then hit Drew with a massive shot to the back of the head, locked in the Hurt Lock properly. Drew tried to push him off in the corner, but Bobby held on. He held on tight. Drew faded. He fell to the floor. He was down, and the referee called for the bell. Now, Drew was completely out. The ref called for the bell. Bobby Lashley is still the WWE Champion. Oh, I was relieved. Because, man, I really didn't want Bobby Lashley to be another transitional champion. I was so happy that them going on first wasn't just a kickstart with a big babyface win. Bobby Lashley is still WWE Champion. He still looks like $1,000,000. I'm hoping he has a long title reign. Thanks WWE, you did the right thing here. And with the match I was most worried about out of the way, we could finally start taking things easy. The next match that came up was the Tag Team Turmoil match. We opened with the first teams out were Lana and Naomi versus Billie Kay and Carmella. There was a lot of back and forth here and there. Now, at one point, I think Lana got knocked out by a super kick from Carmella. Naomi then tossed Carmella out of the ring, which allowed Billie Kay to hit the most devastating move in all professional wrestling, the surprise roll up, and Billie Kay and Carmella, Naomi and Lana were eliminated. The next team that came out were the Riot Squad. Match kind of went the same way. In a way, where they tried the same tactic, but Carmella got a bit over anxious and actually tried to help Billie with the roll up. Well, so that didn't work out. Then they ultimately knocked Carmella down, hit Billie Kay with a double team senton, or rather, Liv Morgan held Billie down while Ruby hit a senton, pin, and Carmella and Billie Kay were eliminated. Out next came Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke, and funnily enough, the weather, it didn't stop. But they'd been cleared to actually continue the event. But it was insanely wet around all over the place. So during the entrance of Dana and Mandy actually slipped on the ramp. So that's got to be embarrassing for her. Sorry. Anyway, they get in the match. It's a lot of back and forth, some close calls here and there. Ultimately, Ruby and Dane. I think it's Ruby and Dane. No, it's Ruby and Mandy, I think. On the outside, or is it Ruby and Mandy? I'm not entirely sure. Dana and Mandy were wearing very similar clothing, so they looked very interchangeable to me. But anyway, it looked like either Mandy or Dana had Liv Morgan down with a roll up, but then Liv reversed the roll up and got the 3 count. Even though the announcer initially said that the Riot Squad were eliminated, but then he had to correct it because it was blatantly obvious the Riot Squad were the ones who got the win. Anyway, then out came Natalya and Tamina. They dominated for a long while. The Riot Squad got some hope spots here and there, but ultimately Liv Morgan was knocked out. Then I can only describe what happened in the finish as the father's tribute, essentially, because both Natalya and Tamina are second-generation superstars. So they proceeded to hit the Heart Attack, which is the finish of the Heart Foundation, and while Natalya's father is the late Jim Neidhart. And then it looked like Natalya was going to go for the sharpshooter, but then she decided to tag in Tamina, who hit the Superfly splash as a tribute to her late father, Jimmy Superfly Snuka, to pick up the win, to pick up the pin and the victory. So, yeah, lucky me that the coin toss landed on them. So, yeah, I was right. So now they're the ones moving on to night 2 to face Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. Next up, I believe, was Seth Rollins versus Cesaro. By the way, if you want to know my thoughts on the matches themselves, Drew versus Bobby was good. The tag team turmoil match was honestly just kind of throwaway. I didn't really give a shit about that match. It was just standard tags, honestly, and not really much to worry about. Anyway, Cesaro and Seth Rollins. Rollins has new music again. At least it sounded like it. I would need to hear a clean version of it to know if it's any good. But it's like he got rid. It keeps disappointing me a little bit that if he was going to keep a character very similar to the Messiah character, even though it isn't anymore, why couldn't he just keep the music? I actually really like the Messiah theme. But anyway, this new song, not sure what to feel about it, but we'll see how this works. Match starts. There's a lot of counters involved back and forth. There's a lot of uppercuts from Cesaro. He even gets. There's even one point where I think Cesaro was going for some sort of superplex maybe, but Rollins counters that into a buckle bomb, and that actually hurts Cesaro's arm in kayfabe, I believe. But still, it becomes an important point later in the match where Cesaro actually manages to finally get the swing on Seth Rollins, but he only hits like 8 before he has to give up because of the arm. Goes for the sharpshooter, but Rollins is immediately able to get to the ropes. Then at one point, Seth Rollins knocks Cesaro down, goes to the top rope and hits this. How should I put it? It's essentially he jumps, turns his body 360 degrees, and hits a frog splash. I think. It's a very interesting maneuver. Oh. Then later on in the match, he hits. He uses the same maneuver that he used on Shinsuke during the Fastlane match, where he goes for a kick, catches himself on Cesaro, and then hits him with a massive kick in the back. He then goes for the curb stomp. There's one. There was one counter I remember where I think Cesaro went for the neutralizer, but Rollins countered that into the pedigree. So he was pulling out a lot of moves here. Anyway, I think the closing section is he goes for the curb stomp, but Cesaro hits him with a massive uppercut. Then he picks him up, puts him on his shoulder, and does the airplane spin where he doesn't even have to hold him. And I believe the commentators say they called this move the UFO. Then he swings Seth Rollins about 23 times, one more than he did on Smackdown. Then he picks him up, hits the neutralizer. 1, 2, 3. Cesaro wins. Really good match overall. So yeah, not more to say about that. Next up, we had the Raw Tag Team title match. The New Day being introduced by Big E. He who is still part of the New Day, even though they're on different brands and can't tag anymore. So they come down, and I would like to point something out that I'm not sure if they've done it before, but there's this entrance graphic that they have, and it shows Woods and Woods and Kingston doing the fusion dance from Dragon Ball Z. But I'm not sure what you would call that. Coavier? Xafi? Kofi Woods? Xavier Kingston? I don't really know. No, because usually when characters fuse, they usually combine their names. Like Goten Trunks becomes Gotenks, Goku Vegeta becomes Gogeta. You know, stuff like that. But yeah, that's not really important. Anyway, Omos and AJ make it to the ring. At first, it looks like Omos is gonna start the match, but Xavier and Kofi convince AJ to be the one to start the match, and then proceed to have essentially a handicap match against them. Because they are just using many double team moves and mocking him throughout it, saying that you're not a tag wrestler. We are a proper tag team. We are making mockery of you. But AJ, of course, is a fantastic wrestler, so he's able to fight through most of it, able to hold them off a little bit. Then eventually he knocks Kofi down while while Woods is positioned on the top rope, meaning AJ's able to tag in Omos. He gets in. He gets hit by several drop kicks and punches, but they do absolutely nothing to him. He doesn't even budge that much. He then proceeds to knock them all down with massive hits. Gets them both in the corner and hit elbows on both sides. He then proceeds to hit backbreakers on both of them. Then at one point he stands near ropes, posing. AJ gets on his shoulders and hits a massive, phenomenal forearm onto Xavier Woods. He then picks up Kofi, pulls him into a I wouldn't call it a pop-up two-handed chokeslam, but essentially he pulls him in, gets him off for a two-handed chokeslam, slams him to the ground. He then puts one foot onto Kofi. 1, 2, 3. AJ and Omos are the new Raw Tag Team Champions. Yeah, not much else to say. I mean, Omos is a very standard big guy wrestler, really. It was kind of an... I mean, in terms of in-ring quality, it wasn't exactly the greatest. Sorry, I drank something during when I watched this watched WrestleMania, so and it's starting to come back up again. But anyway, yeah, AJ and Omos, the new Raw Tag Team Champions. Then we move on to the steel cage match between Shane McMahon and Braun Strowman. Shane comes out, stands in the cage. Braun comes out. He gets on the steps and is immediately attacked by Elias and Jackson Riker. They hit him with multiple chairs, lays into his feet, into his legs specifically, then toss the chair into the cage. Then Braun gets Braun in, and Shane proceeds to level Braun with several chair shots. Whenever Braun gets back in, he targets Braun's legs and keeps him down throughout most of it. But Braun is able to make sure to keep, whenever Shane tries to escape the cage, he doesn't quite get out of it. He knocks Braun down, hits coast to coast, but it's only good for a 2 count. He then tries to escape the cage with the help of Jackson Riker and Elias, but Braun gets up, knocks both Elias and Jackson down from there, pulls Shane down and proceeds to beat the living tar out of him. Before Shane is able to grab a steel plate from the top of the cage and knock Braun down with that. He then climbs the cage, but Braun follows after him. Then there's some bags around the corners of the steel cage, and in one of them, Shane pulls out a toolbox that he hits Braun over the head with. When Braun falls down, Shane is at the top of the cage. He goes on the other side of the cage, climbs down. He pretty much has the match won. He then puts his hand into the cage, does a wave goodbye, and that was really dumb because Braun gets up, grabs Shane, and holds him there. Then he grabs the fence on the steel cage and pulls it off the hinges to make a hole in the essentially make a hole in the cage. He pulls Shane back in. Then they climb up to the top of the cage. He then grabs Shane by the neck, yells, "Who's stupid now?" and tosses Shane off the cage into the ring where he lands on his back. He's a flip bump into the ring. Braun climbs down, hits the power slam. 1, 2, 3. Fuck you, Shane. Shane, you broke my streak. Because I'd gotten every single match correctly with the predictions at that point. But, of course, Shane screwed that up for me. But yeah, Braun celebrates. He's having finally vanquished Shane. And we move on. The next match, it was Bad Bunny and Damian Priest versus Miz and Morrison. The match the entrances starts off with a bunch of people in bunny suits, followed by Miz and Morrison doing a pseudo live version of Hey Hey Hop Hop, that music parody that they were using to insult Bad Bunny. Out comes Damian Priest, and Bad Bunny arrives on a truck. Okay? At first it looks like Damian Priest starts off the match, but Miz is insistent on fighting Bad Bunny. So Priest tags in Bunny, and Bad Bunny proceeds to beat the living tar out of the Miz. He hits him with several punches. He's able to counter most of his moves with roll-ups. He even hits a very nice head scissor onto the Miz. He's able to counter most moves and does really well for himself. In fact, he takes most of this match. He's able to knock down Miz and Morrison on several occasions and keep the pace going. He kicks out of several moves. He's able to counter a lot. He does really well for himself for a celebrity. So whoever trained Bad Bunny in preparation for this match, very well done, sir. Very well done. Anyway, eventually, Bunny finally tags in Priest, who goes on a rampage, beats down Miz and Morrison, but eventually the double team is able to counter it. Then at one point, Priest hits a dive to the outside and knocks down Miz and Morrison. Then Bad Bunny hits a crossbody onto both of them. Priest gets Miz back in the ring, but counters the hit the lights into the Skull Crusher finale. Bad Bunny breaks it up, then goes on the outside and hits John Morrison with a fucking Canadian destroyer. Then he gets back in, gets tagged in by Priest. Priest hoists Miz up on his shoulder. Bad Bunny hits a crossbody onto Miz. 1, 2, 3. So yeah, very impressive work from Bad Bunny. I will say that. Very impressive for a guy who I assume has never wrestled a match before. So yeah, I mean, on a scale from what celebrity is to not competed. From a scale from some guests hosts that have competed in matches to Pat McAfee, I'd say he's about here. Not as I would say Pat McAfee is much better, but man, he did really well for himself. So props there. And yeah, he might have actually had that. I might have actually said that he had match of the night, honestly, because it was either that or Cesaro and Seth Rollins at that point. But then, of course, we got the main event: Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair. Lots of counters, lots of moves back and forth. Lots of trash talking and some really good moves there and there. Let me see if I can remember some spots that I thought were really nice. One I remember is Bianca going for the KOD, but no, it wasn't the KOD. She went for a springboard into a move. She went from the ropes went for a moonsault, but Sasha grabbed her hair and pulled her into a massive knee. And I think she did something similar with the KOD. At one point, she locked in the bank statement, rolled into the middle of the ring, but Bianca caught her and rolled herself really quickly onto the ropes. Let me see if I remember anything else. else? I remember the match was at least really was compelling. It's weird that I'm struggling a little bit to remember this match since I just saw it, but anyway, the finishing sequence at least that I remember. At one point, oh yeah, one thing I should mention. It's a bit sad actually. At one point, Bianca knocks Sasha down to the ground. She goes for the 450 splash. Her precision is great, but the impact looked really bad. Like it looked like it didn't really hit at all. It didn't really look like it really did any damage at all. Anyway, Bianca goes for the KOD. Sasha gets out of it, but then Bianca smacks Sasha with her hair, which I don't believe she's actually done on the main roster in a while. If you've seen her NXT, she can actually cut people open with that hair slap, which she did to Sasha here because she had a visible scar on her body. She then picks Sasha up for the KOD, hit it, 1, 2, 3, and new Smackdown Women's Champion, to the surprise of nobody, I believe. So yeah, well done Bianca, congratulations on becoming Smackdown Women's Champion. Overall, my overall thoughts on the show is that it was an overall really solid night of matches. No match was outright bad, maybe. Bad, I mean, you could say bad things about the Raw Tag title match, considering it wasn't that much of a match, really. But I enjoyed it. The Tag Team Turmoil match was really a nothing match, but it was But I don't really have a problem with how that went, and the winners were nice. The Braun and Shane match was overall a good. I would overall say a good match. I just didn't care for the story going into it. So yeah, I would. And the main event was, I think match of the night. I would possibly say. Again, I might be a little bit tired, so that might be why my thoughts are a little bit inconsistent. Isn't really. And hey, my thoughts might change by the time I review Night 2 tomorrow. But yeah, don't really have much else to say about Night 1. I'll have to hear from what everyone else thinks of Night 1. And then we'll move on to Night 2. See you then.